Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Easy Mini Painting with me, Christopher Ridge, and we are finishing up Godzilla Tokyo Clash with all of the building pieces that come with the board game, all of the building tiles, tokens, whatever you want to call them. And I think that they're pretty straightforward. I don't think you need to do anything very special with them, because you don't want them to be too distracting or draw the eye too much. I mean, you want them to be apparent, but your actual kaiju, your big monsters, they're the stars of the board game. So we've got them color-coded here, but nothing too fancy or spectacular. I'm going to quit talking. Why don't we just get started? So the very first thing that I did was I actually assembled all of the buildings onto these little plates. These are just like random pieces of basically like trash that I had laying around the house, and then I taped them on here. And then I just used some spray paint actually to just do an even coat of black across everything. So yeah, to start with a base coat of matte black. I think that if you want to do something just super duper quick like this, you can get into spray primer. You can use either an actual miniature brand like spray primer, or you could just use regular spray paint, because the details on the buildings here are really not that, fine or precise. So you don't need to worry about getting one that is specifically for miniatures. But after we do that, we're going to take out some ash gray, and then we're just going to dry brush the entirety of all of the buildings. And, to be realistic, like, you don't need to do a lot with these buildings. You're just kind of adding some flavor, some texture to your board and to your miniatures. So take out a dry brush, take out some ash gray, and then just go ahead and apply an even layer of ash gray over all of the buildings, everywhere. Alright, and a little something like that. That's just kind of the thing that you want to start with, and that just gives you, some texture, some color. Just looks a little bit different from the flat, dull, dark gray color that comes default with the, just as the plastic. So again, just do that over all of the miniatures, and then move on to the next thing. Now, another thing that I'll say here, too, is that if you do want to do something a little bit more zazzy, a little bit more sort of, interesting or flavorful or colorful, you don't have to, but it's an option, is that instead of using ash gray like this, you could use some honed steel. You could use any sort of, metal steel color. Try not to do anything too bright, don't do like a sterling silver or anything like that. But if you do that, that'll give you kind of a nice sort of, cool industrial metallic look to the buildings here as well. The only reason I'm going with gray here is because that sort of is more like concrete to me, and I think that that's kind of the thing that we're sort of looking for when it comes to our buildings, is that they're mostly made out of, concrete. Obviously, there's, like steel and stuff for, blah, 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 blah. Architecture and interesting things that I have no business talking about because I don't know anything about. But I just feel like a nice sort of concrete look is a cool sort of base color scheme for all of your buildings here. But again, if you want to do something, maybe a little bit more visually striking, or something that looks kind of neat, again, you can use like a metallic color. You can use any sort of steel color. You can use honed steel. You can use gunmetal. You can use plate mail metal. Anything like that. I gotta say, I really am a fan of these structures, actually. I think that they're very elegantly designed. I think that you get across all of the details of the sort of structures that you're looking for. Of this power station here, you've got the sort of like electrical walls there, you got like the sort of walls there, sort of gating it off, and then you've got the big power tanks and the big warehouse and that kind of thing. And then for the military base, you've got a nice cool sort of bunker look, but then you've got some barrels there and some crates, and the doors have just the right amount of detail. Again, they're really, really simplistic, but I think that they're really elegantly designed, because I think that you get to see a lot with just a little amount of plastic, and also not too, overly designed and not overly thought out. I think that these are pretty cool, actually. I'm a big fan. All right. And now I've got a nice even layer of, black and then a dry brush layer of gray over there. And that you can just see right off the bat, that gives them a lot more depth. You can see more shade in there, more shadow. It looks a lot more visually striking than just having them be flat gray. So I'm going to rinse off my dry brush completely. And now we're going to start adding some color to our buildings. And I figured that the way that we could go about that is actually by looking at the sort of spaces that the buildings go on. So if we refer to the rulebook here, and this is how it is on the actual game tiles too, need to make sure not to get paint onto my rulebook here, but you can see that there's sort of a color coding for each one. Towers are yellow, military bunkers are green, power plants are orange, and radar dishes are purple. So why don't we try to keep to that color scheme, and that way it's going to be more easily, apparent and readily apparent too, that when you see, a game tile and it's got a color on it, you're like, oh, grab the corresponding color. Rather than green, what does that mean? Oh, that means military bunker. Okay, so grab the military bunker, right? So let's try to do some color matching here. So I took out some Goblin Green, and I'm going to be using my dry brush again, and this time we're going to be dry brushing just the bunkers of the military bunker. Try to leave the sort of surrounding ground, so to speak, that sort of, gray and black color. And the same with the sort of like equipment, like the boxes and the barrels on the side too. So let's just go over the bunker with this Goblin Green, and that should give it just a little bit of a extra sort of green color to it, which is, I think, thematically appropriate. I think that green is a sort of typical army, military kind of color. There you go, and then that sort of gives it the sort of like military green kind of look to it, but you still retain that cool shade. You can still retain that sort of like texture to it by doing dry brushing. So the same thing with the other two. There we go, so now the military bunkers have a nice green color to them. And then the last thing that we're going to do with that same green color is that we're gonna maybe cheat a little bit. Tell you what, I'm going to say you can do this if you want to, but if you don't want to because it's just a little bit too bright, too obvious, I wouldn't blame you. Don't worry about it. But I'm going to do it here anyway just so you can see what it looks like. And that's that I'm going to use that same color, and then I'm going to paint the entirety of the base trim. That's like the trimming that goes around the actual base, like this. And that way it's just a little bit more sort of, apparent when you're again, like grabbing it out of the bag of buildings, so to speak, when you're playing the game and you're like, well, wait, which one is that again? Okay, just green goes on green, right? Again, you don't have to, but I'll just do this in case you're curious as to what it looks like. There you go, a little something like that. And like I said, the sort of trimming that I did there for the bases, I would say is entirely optional. You don't have to do that, but I think that just makes it a little bit more apparent. If you want to be a little more subtle, you can just avoid it, but it's up to you. All right, I'm going to rinse off my brush, and we're going to move on to the next color. So I'm going to take out some lava orange, and we're going to use that for the power plant motifs. Now, I will use a slightly smaller brush for this, because what I want to do is I want to paint those tanks right there. I think that's an appropriate color to be a sort of sort of orangey, power color. A little something like that. You can do multiple layers if you want it to be more bright, but if you want just a single layer, that can kind of retain that sort of texture that you had underneath it too. I'll go ahead and leave it as just one layer, just so you can kind of, look at it like that. And then we'll also do the tops of the sort of smokestacks. Power, exhaust ports, exhaust towers, whatever, words. There you go, just a little something like that. And that way, that just gives a little bit of extra color to your power plants. So just do that for all of them. Right, and there you go. That's a cool sort of collection of power plants right there. So I think that looks pretty neat. And then similarly to what I did with the green bases there, with the military bases, I'm going to go ahead and do a solid layer of that orange along the trimming. And I will do a couple of layers to make that nice and thick, though. So I'm going to do that. Again, I'll say it's optional, though, so you don't have to if you don't want to. Alright, and then that's it for the power plants. Those have that nice sort of orange look to them, but they still look kind of nice and naturalistic. And again, I think that the paint job is reflective of the sort of, like simplistic yet elegant design of the models themselves. So I'm going to rinse that brush off. Alright, and now for the weird one. The radar dishes have a purple look to it, so I'm going to take out some alien purple, but the only thing is that, you don't see a lot of structures with purple on them, or at least not as a primary color, not as a motif. So we're going to try to keep it relatively simple, and what we'll just do is we'll just paint the sort of cross-section of each radar dish, and then we'll go ahead and do the base itself. And I think that will be enough. Alright, little something like that. You just get some kind of purple on the cross sections of those radar dishes. And then again, we're going to go ahead and do the thing where we paint the bases on the side. Again, purely optional, but I'm going to do it. Alright, and there you go. That just gets that nice sort of purple trimming on the side there. Alright, so I'm done with that. I'm going to rinse that brush off. And then last up are the towers, and we're going to take out some Daemonic Yellow for that. And we're going to do not a lot, a fair amount, but still not a lot with this yellow. What I'm going to do for the primary color scheme on each building, actually, is I'm going to try to do something that's a little bit simple, but just a little bit minute. I'm going to take out like a, little detail brush here. And then I'm just going to paint yellow dots basically on each sort of skyscraper side there, and that way they can be windows. They can basically be windows. A little something like that. That's all you need. Make them just a little bit vertical like that. If you don't have a little... Oh, Toki! Hey! Toki, get... Cat's getting into... Fat boy? Boy? Okay, I think he's just passing by. That's it. As long as he didn't get any paint on his paws. But as long as you have a brush that's got a very sharp point, then that'll be fine too. If you've got a detail brush like this, then you might as well use it. But if you don't have it, just make sure that the tip of your brush is very, very sharp. That's all that you really need. There you go, a little something like that, and that just kind of makes it look like they've got sort of, lights on throughout the building. If you tell you what, too, I'll go ahead and do this for the rest of this. Well, I'll just move on to another building for now. Tell you what, if you don't want to do that much of it either, you can just do it in spots, and that way it'll look like only certain, areas of the building have lights on. You don't need to do the whole of each row. You could do this kind of thing right here. There you go, you could do something like that, and that way it's not quite as time-consuming, and in a way it could maybe have a little bit more sort of like personality to it. You can have all of the lights on like that, or you can have just some of the lights on like that. Up to you, whatever you want to do. Okay, there you go. So that's a little bit of a time-consuming thing, but if you just take the time to do it, I think that it'll look really satisfying. I think that looks really cool. That's got that nice sort of, sense of, yeah, some of the lights are on in the buildings and some of them are not. Now, if you want to take it a step further, you can also take some matte black and you could go over all of the spots that you didn't put windows onto, and that just sort of gives the look of there are windows, but there are no lights on. That's up to you, though. I'm not going to do that right here because it is time-consuming, but it's another thing that is really simple to do, and if you want to take the time to do it, you can go ahead and do it. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and get these sort of... I don't really know what these are supposed to be up here. Maybe they're just supposed to be, like water tanks or something. That's probably what they're supposed to be, but I'm going to get the tops of these on the skyscrapers here. Just a little bit of extra flavor. There you go, that's it. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is, like we did with the other structures, is I'm going to go ahead and paint the base trimming, and then we're done. That's really it. If you want to also, you can kind of, like similarly to what you did with the structures there, you could take some of the other buildings here and you could apply those sort of light effects in there too. So, we'll move on to the power stations here, and if you want, you could just kind of, make it look like there's some windows with some lights on in there, on some of the buildings here. I'll go ahead and do that, but it's up to you. You don't have to do this. Might just give a little bit of a sort of finishing touch kind of quality to it. There you go. And then that's it. Like I said, that just kind of gives a little bit of a finishing touch on the power stations there. But yeah, now we'll go back to our larger brush, and we're going to go ahead and get the bases on the buildings. And there you go, that's pretty much all that you need, and that is it for all of the building tokens that come with Godzilla Tokyo Clash. Now, the very last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a layer of matte varnish, but I am going to do something a little bit different today. So in the past, I've always done, brush-on varnishes, but you can actually get, if you find it, you can get like a spray varnish. So here's the, the Army Painter brand here, but yeah, this is just, it's basically just a clear coat that goes over each token. I wouldn't use this for miniatures that you want to retain a lot of detail for, because it can, depending on how you do it, it can maybe leave like a texture or something like that on there. But if you're just going to be doing these really simplistic, buildings right here, I think that will work just fine. So I'm going to go spray those, and that's it. And that should about do it for all of the buildings from Godzilla Tokyo Clash, and that will then do it for all of the board game Godzilla Tokyo Clash. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like it, go ahead and throw it a like. If you want to see more miniature painting tutorials just in general, you can subscribe to the channel. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do next. I have sort of it's like a Warhammer 40k starter kit of some kind, or a starter board game. It's some sort of adventure marine game or something like that. And it's got some cool marine figures that come with it. So I was kind of thinking about knocking out them, but I'm not really sure. I'll just kind of play it by ear. But yeah, that's it. I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night, everyone.